Hello, guys. Good morning. As usual, I will be giving just 1 minute to allow you guys to come in before we start the business of the day. How are you guys doing? Those working at home, remotely, those in the office. Hope everything is moving on smoothly. Yeah, I can see a couple of familiar names on my attendees list. You guys are welcome once again. Like I said 1 minute ago, I'll be giving just 1 minute to allow you guys to come in. I guess I'll just take it off from here, even as you guys keep joining us. Good morning once again and welcome. For those of you guys that are joining us for the first time, my name is Gagba Esahaya, and I'm one of the training coordinators with the Temple Small Business Development Center. The Temple Small Business Development Center helps small businesses start and grow. We offer free one-on-one consulting and a variety of low to no cost webinars. We are proud to be part of the nationally accredited network of the Small Business Development Centers, which has over 1,000 networks across the United States. You are here this morning for a webinar on cybersecurity. A copy of the PowerPoint and a link to the recording will be sent to all the attendees. Being a webinar, all the attendees have been muted. However, we always encourage you guys to drop your questions on the Q&A or the chat box. Without further ado, please allow me to welcome our wonderful speaker, even as he takes over the floor for the presentation. Colonel, you are welcome once again.
Thank you. If you could give me permission to share, I could just start right away. No problem. Thank you everyone for being here. And by the way, if you have any questions, there's a Q&A right down here at the bottom of your screen for Zoom. There's also a chat. I have spots in the presentation where I'll stop and make sure that you guys have time to ask some questions. But if you ask them beforehand, I'll just wait until we end up getting to those spots. That is where I find the most value comes from for all of you on this call, is if you have a specific question about your business or about yourself or your family or anything like that relating to our topic today, which is staying secure while working remotely. That is where you'll get the most value. So I highly encourage you to ask questions, because I will definitely answer them. Let me just get everything set up right here, and then we're ready to go. So today we're going to be talking about staying secure while working remotely. This could mean working from home. This could mean working from a public place, basically anywhere that's not a standard place of business or your office or your small business or anything like that. So with COVID, with the change in workforce, a lot of more people are working remotely, but that kind of comes with some unintentional risks that people might be exposed to. So my goal today is to just inform everyone. It's like, hey, here are some things that you should be not necessarily concerned about, but aware of, and then some very common sense tips to make you just a little bit more secure while you're doing all of that. So these are the 5 topics we'll end up addressing today. 1 is password protecting the Wi-Fi. 2 is enabling multi-factor authentication. I'll explain that, and I'll also explain some of the different ways that you can use multi-factor authentication. 3 is updating your software. 4, staying alert for phishing. So I specifically call out SMS and voice here because 5, the most popular form of phishing, and phishing, we can get into what that is in a bit, is email phishing, getting scam emails, getting people sending you weird links that ask for your passwords and stuff. So we'll get into how to recognize that so that you don't fall prey to that. And again, please put any questions you have throughout the presentation in the chat or in the Q&A. This says in the Q&A, happy to address them. And that is where all of you get the most value. So our first topic, password protecting your Wi-Fi. Why does it matter if you have a password on your home Wi-Fi or any other Wi-Fi thereof? So first is unprotected Wi-Fi allows anyone to connect to your network. So if your neighbor, if your kids bring friends over, if you have friends over, anything like that, if you don't have a password on your Wi-Fi, anyone that can get close to your home or close to wherever this Wi-Fi is can get access, which doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. But when people have access and you don't know them, or they necessarily shouldn't have access, it's just an unnecessary risk that you're exposed to. So also to note is home networks are more trusted. When you're working at home, when you're working from your own home office or maybe even your bedroom or anything like that, you are more you're more trusting of what's going on. You're more trusting of the tools that you're using. And so your devices are what we call discoverable. Everybody's had problems printing stuff. And so when you set up a new printer, you'll get this message on the screen sometimes, or a message on your computer. It's like, hey, would you like to let other devices on this network basically know that it's here? Be discoverable is what it's called. So what that means is that if anyone else connects to your network, they'll be able to see all of those devices. So if people can see your devices, they can start to understand a little bit about them, which is what we would want to prevent. So if you have a password on your Wi-Fi, that would get rid of that completely. So if somebody can gain access to your network because it is not password protected, they'll be able to see those unprotected devices and know what you're doing. So how can you do this? How can you password protect your Wi-Fi? Let me actually pull up the Q&A, make sure I have that over here. Yes, we will go through VPNs. Thank you for that, Michael. So on the back of your Wi-Fi router, there will often be instructions. All of your Wi-Fi today, basically you plug in your router and then it sets itself up. That's typically how easy it is. However, on the back of your router, there will be a little sticker that has a username and a password that come by default. So here's what I would recommend. First off, log in to your router. So that's as simple as going to your computer and going to the web address that's on the back of your router, and change your username and password because those are default from whatever company sent you the router. 2, set up multiple Wi-Fi connections. So what do I mean by this? So there's 2 types of Wi-Fi. Basically, there's 5 gigahertz and there's 2.4 gigahertz. What that means is it's just the wavelength of the actual signal itself. So 5G is a lot faster, but 2.4G spreads a lot further. They're no different other than that. There's no inherent security flaw between the 2 of them. They're just, one's for range, one is for just direct speed. So what I would recommend you do is set up a guest network on your router. So a lot of router these days, if you log into them through the instructions on the back, you'll be able to set up not only your internal private network, which nobody can get access to unless you give them the exact name of the Wi-Fi, unless you give them the password and the username itself. So that's typically just for you, your direct family members, or maybe your roommates, or whoever you end up trusting. And then you can set up a separate network for guests where you can have a separate password for guests and you can end up putting a little more security features in place for that Wi-Fi connection as well. So it ends up what we call segmenting your private devices from anyone else that might be in your home or around your home at that time. And then if possible, don't allow network discovery. Now, I know that it is very convenient to just allow things to connect to each other, especially when it comes to printing. It seems like it's the bane of everyone's existence. So I'm not going to say don't do that, but if possible, it's not necessary to do a lot of things, especially these days as technology becomes easier to use. So if possible, just don't allow it. So the second thing that we were going to talk about is passwords. So password strength. How can you make a really strong password? So let's go through this chart on the left here. And if we're going down this column, we have the number of characters. That's just simply the length of the password. And if we go across the top of these rows, we have the types of letters, numbers, symbols, whatever combination of things make up this password. And then in this table, this is basically how long it would take a modern computer to randomly guess your password. So for instance, if I have a password that's 6 digits long with only numbers, it can be guessed instantly. There are so few combinations of 6-digit passwords with just numbers that if that's your password, it can be guessed instantly by a computer, which means your account is insecure. However, if you had a 12-digit password with uppercase, lowercase, and letters, it would take a modern computer over 2,000 years to guess, just because of the huge increase in the number of possible combinations. So when you're creating a secure password, I recommend one of two things. First is, if you're going to create your own passwords, you can remember just 4 random words, like blimp, water, cup, microphone. And then you can keep those 4 words and then just put a number between all of them. So blimp, water cup, microphone, put a 1 between all of them. That is a very long and secure password. And then you could just vary those 4 different words in different combinations, and that would be a very secure way to generate random passwords. But what I would recommend most is to use a password manager. So personally, I use a password manager called LastPass. And what it allows me to do is to connect my laptop, my cell phone, my desktop, my work devices, whatever, with all of the passwords that I've created at separate on the places on the internet or separate applications that I'm using, and it manages them all for me. So it'll create really, really, really secure passwords for me that I don't need to remember. The only thing that I need to make sure that I do is I have access to my thumbprint so I can authenticate on my cell phone. And then I remember my master password for my password vault. So I would recommend doing that. There are a lot of password managers that are free for individual use. There are a lot of really, really effective business password managers. I think the one that I have is like $3 a month for businesses. So I get it for free because I'm just using it myself, but you can pay like $3 a month and you'd end up getting a really high quality password manager. And then here on the right, here's just examples of what kind of passwords would look like. Please keep in mind, do not use this specific password because it's probably very common and is going to be one of the first ones guessed by a computer as well. So multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication is a combination of 2 things. One is you're going to have a username and password. That's the first. And the second is you have some other form of verification. And I'll go into those different types of verification. But basically, this is saying instead of just having a username and password, I have that plus some other kind of verification that leads to access. So that's where the multi-factor authentication comes in. Specifically, 2-factor authentication is what we recommend. And then here are the different types of multi-factor authentication. First is your fingerprint, and keep in mind that's like your cell phone right here. In order to log into my cell phone, I need a fingerprint, and then most often when I'm trying to get into my bank or my app or any app on my phone, I just have to not only have the correct username and password, but then I have to authenticate with my thumbprint. That is usually the most effective one. It's also the quickest to use. It's very easy to set up, and as phones end up getting better and more technologically advanced, it ends up becoming easier to use. Another one that all of you might be aware of is a key fob. A key fob, I used to have one for my bank. It's unhackable, right? Because it's just a thing that's not connected to the internet. You press a button, you get 6 digits on it. However, if you lose the key fob, you can lose access. So that is the drawback of key fobs. The one that I personally enjoy the most, the one that I use is authenticator apps right here. So these are 2 authenticator apps. This one on the left here is Authy, AUTHY, and the one on the right here is Google Authenticator. Most authenticator apps function exactly the same, so there's no inherent difference between the 2 of them. I use Google. I used to use Authy. I don't have any specific reason to use one over the other as of now. But these are typically the most convenient. It's one way to, organize all of the different applications that might be using multi-factor authentication so that you don't have to go to hundreds of different places on your cell phone or in your desk. If you have a bunch of key fobs, an authenticator app, you can just scroll through whatever account you're trying to get that authentication code for. And it's typically just right there. And then the fourth is an SMS or a phone call, basically a text message or a phone call. Now, this isn't quick, and it's also what I'm starting to see. So Phin does security awareness training, phishing simulation. So basically, we study how individuals get phished out of their money, out of their information, and out of access to accounts. And what we're starting to see is specifically there are malicious actors, malicious individuals that are able to steal the SMS MFA code by phishing users out of it. So you'll go to a fake website and you'll attempt to log in. The MFA, like the little prompt will come up. It's like, hey, we just texted you a code. What is it? And then turns out that that wasn't the real, application sending you the SMS. That was somebody else texting you asking for it. And so I don't recommend SMS just because it's a little more insecure than authenticator apps. And authenticator apps have become so convenient that you could just use all of those. So now I'll pause for questions. So I see we have a few here already that I'll end up getting into. And I'll make a note that I'm going to address why you should enable MFA right now. But I'll pause for questions here. I'm going to answer these three in the chat. I think everybody can see them. And so Michael Jerry asks, I didn't see it listed in your topics of conversations, but if you have time, I'd like to get your thoughts on VPN. Michael, if you don't mind, I would love to answer that at the end. VPNs, for you, those of you that don't know, are just a way of securing your internet traffic so other people can't look at it, and including the internet service providers that you use. So I will address that because that is a huge, huge, huge security thing you can do to create more security. Then Michael Jerry also asks, if big companies like Experian, Home Depot get hacked and exposed, how can we trust a service like LastPass? So there's two things to remember here, Michael. It's are you as the individual more likely to store your passwords insecurely, to generate them insecurely, and to be a security vulnerability? Or is a company like LastPass, whose job it is to be secure, more likely to get breached, more likely to do something insecure as well? I always err on the side of caution there, in that humans are more likely to make a human mistake, and companies that are set up to do these things typically are not as insecure as an individual doing it who doesn't have a lot of experience here. That, and when you throw in the convenience factor of being able to just go to one place in your cell phone or on your laptop that has all of that managed for you, I think the benefits outweigh the potential cons like that. So basically you're saying, you know, all of these other big companies, they have the potential of getting hacked as well. So what should we do? I still think you should trust them, at least as an individual. When it comes to working business to business, there are a lot of different questions that should be asked about, centered around cyber insurance, and then security audits and the actual security of those businesses. But for an individual using LastPass, I think it would be more than okay. And then Vicky says, free version of LastPass doesn't let you recover your account if you cannot remember your master password. What to do then? So I believe, so Vicky, that's actually a security feature. That's like the one thing when you set up your account, they ask you not to do. It's like, hey, write this down, write down your master password and store it in multiple places, 4 or 5 different places. I've done that, so that this doesn't happen. I believe there is a recovery process, but it takes a long time, and it is not automated. Like, you will have to actually jump through some hoops in order to get your account back. And that is very intentional. That is to promote additional security, so to speak. Does anyone have, if that was unclear, Vicky, or if you have an additional question centered around what I just said there, let me know. But I do believe there's a recovery process that you can go through. Vicky has one more question. She said, Vicky said, I had a situation where I was working from home and my company was hacked. My Wi-Fi is password protected, but I was logged in with my home network with a possibly compromised device. What are the possibilities for the intruders of the company? Did they hack my home network and the device is connected to that network? I changed the password on the home network soon as we find out what was going on. But how do I make sure that my laptop is not compromised now? So it sounds like you were logged on to your home network and a work device was compromised. You should ask your work. Okay. You should ask your work the scope of that compromise. I'd like to know how they knew that they were compromised. But depending upon the type of intrusion, not necessarily. There almost certainly is nothing for you to worry about. If it was a work device, I'd be interested to know if the devices were targeted or if you yourself were targeted, but that would be a very separate question. I would say don't worry about it. Ask your company what was the scope of the intrusion, and did anything happen? Because even though your device might have been impacted, that doesn't necessarily mean that your home network was impacted at all, because that was just where your device happened to be when it was targeted. They didn't want to share that information with me. You should ask this direct question that you've asked me to them, and then say that you have concerns about your home network. If you do, that would probably be the best way to do that. And then let me put in the chat. Yep, no problem, Vicky. One thing that I would like to address as well. So why should you enable MFA? So if we go back to this multi-factor authentication screen, basically multi-factor authentication creates this additional layer of security. Now it can work against you if somebody else gets access to your account and you don't have multi-factor on, they could set it up. So every piece of software you use, so whether it's Facebook, whether it's Zoom, anything that you've ever had to make an account for these days allows you to use multi-factor authentication and to create multi-factor authentication. So if somebody gets access to your account and there isn't multi-factor authentication enabled, they could switch it on because they're in your account, and they could end up enabling it on your behalf with their cell phone, with their authenticator app. And then that becomes way, way, way harder of a problem to end up solving, to get your account back, to get your information back. So what I would suggest is everybody everywhere on this call, if you have not enabled multi-factor authentication on any of the services or pieces of software you use, absolutely go enable that right now in order to prevent that case from happening. It happens more often than you would think. Keep in mind, I got one more spot in this presentation for these questions. And Michael, I will get to your question about VPNs at the end. So we will have one more spot if any questions come up, just like this screen right here. So another thing that you can do to be more secure working from home is update your software. Now, there's two different types of software that you should be updating. First is any of the applications you use. Think of the Zoom that we're on right now. Think of, I'm using Google Chrome. Think of Microsoft Teams. All of these different pieces of software that get installed on your devices. That's one set. And the second is your operating system. There are really three big operating systems. There's Windows, there's Apple's OS X, and then there is Linux, but Linux is probably not in the scope of what anyone is using here today. So it's just basically Windows and OS X. So think about it like this. If your operating system has an update because of some security flaw, because security researchers and thousands of developers and cybersecurity folks at Microsoft and at Apple every day are looking for vulnerabilities in their own in the operating system that are on these computers in an attempt to get there before the bad guys do, and to patch it is what we call it. And that is what these updates are for. Partially is for these security updates. It's also for quality of life improvements, for new features, all that good stuff, but also security updates. So if you don't update your operating system, it's like having a big crack in the foundation of your house, that if any water found its way to around your home, it would just flow right in through the crack in your foundation. So it'd be a big problem. Whereas having not updating any of the applications you use, whether that's for security updates or for features, would kind of be like leaving a window unlocked or a door open or something like that. It's not necessarily as big of an issue as a crack in your foundation, but it's still not something that you would like to do. So do not ignore these updates. So on Windows and Mac, how can you actually go about updating your software? So the first is on Windows, which is what I'm on right now. Excuse me. Is click the start button in the bottom left-hand side, go to your settings, go to updates and security, and then click Windows Update. So if you see a screen just like this here on the left, this means you're up to date. If not, you'll have an option to install the latest updates. And I would highly recommend doing so after this conversation. On Mac, it's a little simpler. Just click the Apple menu, click software update, and if available, you'll see an update like this. Now, there's two things to remember. If you have a computer that cannot update, so this, keep in mind, does not mean updating from Windows 10 to Windows 11. That doesn't necessarily make you more secure. This is making sure that the Windows 10 that you're using today is actually secure. If you have an old enough computer that doesn't have enough resources, it's just too old, you won't be able to update to more secure versions of the operating systems. So it's very important. Typically, laptops or any type of desktop, after 6 to 8 years, that laptop, that desktop is kind of getting to its end of life and should probably be upgraded in some way, shape, or form. And then on the Apple side, if you have a device that is 6 releases, so 6 years old, Apple won't even let you upgrade to the next version of the operating system. So at 6 years, Apple no longer supports security updates for your device. And so slowly that Apple device will end up becoming more and more and more insecure. So 6 to 8 years is what I say is usually about the end of life of these devices. If you have any questions on any of this stuff, too, let me know. So we're going to get into, we're going to get into phishing. So what is phishing? Phishing is basically the act of somebody attempting to steal your money, attempting to steal information, attempting to get you to steal access to any of your banks or anything like that. And that can come in many different shapes, many different sizes. As you can see here, there's 4 different types of phishing that we're going to call out today: social engineering, voicemail phishing. I mean, I get voicemails all the time on my phone. Getting phished through SMS, that's a text phish, and then getting phished through email. So I'm going to teach you, all of you here, a little bit about how to recognize that, because the proper way to respond to that is to pretty much just block the sender and don't respond at all. It doesn't prevent it from happening in the future, right? People get your phone number, your email address somehow on the internet, and then we'll end up targeting you with that. So it's not going to prevent it in the future, but it will make you more secure when you recognize that it is happening. So 91% of successful data breaches start with a phishing email. This is a hotly debated statistic in my field in cybersecurity. But basically what this is saying is that the majority of data breaches you read about in the news, or you hear about, or that happen to you or to any business that you're aware of, are a result of a human tricking another human into doing something they shouldn't, whether that's giving up their login information, whether that's giving them, sending a wire transfer the wrong way, so on and so forth. Humans are involved in that. So phishing is a big, big problem. And then only 11% of organizations train their employees to recognize these attacks. And that's one of the problems that I'm aiming to solve, is to make that 11% number go way up. Because if we can train people to recognize what's happening, then we can stop it in its tracks. That's my philosophy, so to speak. And then just to give you a little bit of information on how big of a problem this is, it accounted for over $12 billion in losses to US businesses in 2019, according to the FBI. So there's a very, very big problem. So let's go through analyzing phishing emails. So the first is, all you have to do is really ask yourself these 5 questions and then be honest about them. Are you expecting this email as a big one? If you're not expecting something and it comes in from out of the blue, the goal of phishing is to send the communication, send the email, send the text message at a point where the person you're sending it to might not be willing to, might have some kind of immediate response, whether that's because of the urgency or the authority, or the fear of missing out that this email or this text message creates. Maybe it's your boss saying, you got to go. This is the most common scam I hear of. It still happens all the time. Is your boss, quote unquote, your CEO, whoever, somebody that you might not meet on a regular basis, says, hey, I need you to go buy gift cards for a client, for important people coming in town, whatever it ends up being. I need you to go do that now. The deal hinges on it. The business hinges on it. And if you don't do this, bad things might happen. Well, right when you get that, what typically happens is there's an emotional response. You feel worried and you're like, holy cow, there's an urgency here. I need to go do this right now. I'm just going to go out. I'm going to go buy these gift cards. And you come back, you sit down at your computer and you send the gift card codes to the CEO that sent you that. And at that point, whatever money you ended up spending on those gift cards is gone. So a lot of people that I hear about, they spend $300, $500 on gift cards and then give that money away. There's no way of getting that back. So if you know of anyone that's been through that scam, know that they're not alone. I hear many conversations about that happening, but also if it ever happens in the future, tell them it's a scam. Don't tell the CEO to go buy their own gift cards. Don't buy them for some random people on the internet. 2, is this email too good to be true? If you get an email, one of the appeals in the email that phishing can have is fear of missing out. So if you're worried you're going to miss out on a deal that is too good to be true, that should probably give you pause for concern. 3, does the email domain match the sender? So what I mean by that is if you get an email from Zoom, like an invite to a Zoom, and it's zoom.us, and then you look at the person or the company sending you that email and it doesn't say zoom.us, that is a big red flag that is not actually Zoom. So you should be cautious about that, to say the least. 4, when you hover over a link, where does it go? So to be clear, clicking on a link in an email doesn't necessarily do anything bad, right? It's going to route you to some weird place on the internet, potentially. It doesn't download, clicking on a link doesn't download malware, it doesn't do anything like that. But what it'll do is it'll bring you to a place on the internet that might not be what it seems. So the most common scam that I help people deal with right now is when you click on a link to go log into Microsoft, your Microsoft account, you'll end up going to a web address that is very suspiciously close to Microsoft. I think it's microsoftlive.com is the valid web address. I should go check that out, but it'll be something else. It'll be Microsoft Live with an extra I.com. Very suspiciously close to Microsoft. And then what'll happen is you'll end up logging in at that website, and the individuals who sent you that phishing email have software at that website that will end up just taking the credentials you enter, putting it into the valid Microsoft website, and then they'll end up stealing your account. So you need to, when you hover, when anyone's asking you to go anywhere on the internet to do anything, you should hover over that link first, see exactly where it goes, and it should match exactly with what you expect. Microsoft.com, Facebook.com, your bank, WellsFargo.com, PNC, whatever it is. And the 5th is, can you confirm the authenticity of this email? That is namely the sender. If a person from your finance department or from somewhere else in your business or a vendor that you guys typically work with is sending you something, can you give them a phone call? Can you actually have them confirm the authenticity of the email? You know, if you're wire transferring tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, one phone call is absolutely worth the absolute confirmation. I hear a lot of stories of exactly that happening where the authenticity is not confirmed. Somebody swoops in at the last minute and says, hey, you know, we made some last minute changes to the banking information. Can you please, just send the payment here? Oh, and by the way, it's a day late, so can you send it now? Calling the actual vendor that sent that invoice would prevent hundreds of thousands of dollars of loss every day, for sure. Just confirming it. So these are the 5 questions. If you haven't already taken a screenshot or written these down, I do this, all my emails, I kind of have a gut check for this. I spend a few seconds looking at them or just not interacting at all. So now let's teach you how to recognize some of the vulnerabilities I mentioned. So the first is domain impersonation. That was the Microsoft Live with 2 eyes example that I gave. So there's a couple of different types of ways that domains can be impersonated. First is root domain. Basically, instead of receiving email from bigcompany.com, you receive it from bigcompany-mailer.com. This is not Big Company. This is bigcompany-mailer, which is a completely different website. So unless this had a .com right after the big company, it is not the actual web address of the company you expect to be working with. So always be aware of typos in the exact web address, in the email address, always that would be another example of root domain. And then second type is top domain impersonation. So what that means is there's a whole host of different endings to websites, to email addresses. There's .info, .com, .org, .net, .io. There's hundreds. There's even .party. There's weird ones too. So basically, a lot of companies know this, and they'll go out and they will buy the domains that have the actual domain here, but have a different ending, so that people still end up trusting it, inherently trusting it a little bit. So just be aware whenever you're communicating with somebody, whenever you're looking at a website, make sure you have the valid email ending and also the valid web address. The entire thing is very important. The next is called subdomain squatting. So this is probably the most common, because what happens is it looks very, very realistic. It's CEO at bigcompany.insecuremail.com. So people typically see big company if that's the thing you're expecting, and they just go on with their day. However, the thing to know here is big company, since it comes before the domain that is right before the ending, this is called a subdomain. So this is not something that big company actually controls. So this could be anyone on the internet. Specifically, whoever controls insecuremail.com controls bigcompany.insecuremail.com. So actually, the domain here is not big company, it's insecure mail. So it's not who you're expecting to talk with. And this is a very common way that individuals will end up attempting to impersonate companies. Do brand impersonation is what we call it, is through this subdomain impersonation. So always be looking out for that. You always need to make sure that what comes right before the ending is exactly what you'd expect. Typo squatting. This is just, instead of an O, there's a 0. Instead of an A, there's that weird backward A. I forget what it's called. Instead of an I, there's a 1. Always be very, very cognizant of the exact email address and exact website you're going to. And then here's some more examples of common typo squatting. So then Regina asks, my question is about the website. I'm concerned about when somebody signs up on my website and the email looks strange. How can I protect myself? Can you clarify this for me, Regina? Are you asking, when you sign up to anything on a website, you get emails that look strange and you're protecting yourself from that? Or when somebody signs up on your business's website and their email looks strange, what should you do? Can you just clarify that? And then while they're doing that, the second type is display name impersonation. This is very simply somebody impersonates somebody you know or a business that you know. So in this case, if you had a friend named Josiah Carberry, you can set the name of the email account to Josiah Carberry, even though the web address here is jjwhite003@gmail.com. So this is not necessarily the friend you might know or the business you typically end up doing work with. This is something else completely. Third, malicious links and images. So this is an example of a fake email from the IRS. To be clear, is not from the IRS. These links look realistic, right? This email looks realistic. It has the right logo. It has something, a little bit of FOMO here, like, holy cow, we paid too much in taxes. We're getting a bunch back. I just need to go claim my money. But then when you hover over the link, it's going to some really weird place on the internet. It's actually going to a United Kingdom based web address, kerrybaptist.org.uk. It's absolutely not the IRS. So basically I'm just rehashing here on the looking at malicious links, making sure you know where you are on the internet before you end up doing anything, because depending upon where you end up going, you could get to a place that looks super realistic like this and then end up making a mistake. And then I'm actually going to address Michael Jerry's question here about VPNs. So I know we have roughly 10, 15 minutes left. I have one more topic, but I want to make sure I get to VPNs because it's very important. So for those of you that don't know, a VPN just letters VPN, stands for virtual private network. And basically, it is a layer of security that stands between you, like me at my computer right now, and wherever my requests are going to the internet. It encrypts them in such a way that whoever is helping transit those requests can't necessarily snoop in on those requests and see what's happening. It's also a way of shielding your actual location. So a VPN could make it seem like you're accessing the internet from London or from somewhere in Africa or Bangladesh or anywhere in the world. It's a way of obfuscating who you are, what you're doing, and where you're doing it from. So for individuals that want to make sure that all of their data, that they continue to have a large amount of privacy, it's very, very important. Two things, virtual private networks for private use, company use. I would recommend both. Personally, for me, I use a VPN called Surfshark. I forget how much I paid for it. There are free VPNs out there that you could use if you'd really like, but most of them are very inexpensive, like a few dollars a month. So I use a VPN called Surfshark. It's on my laptop, my desktop, my phone. It is on everything that I own, and that is namely why I bought that company. I'm not recommending necessarily that you go buy them. What I would recommend is there are many popular VPNs that you guys have heard of. There's Norton has one, Nord, N-O-R-D. There are hundreds of different VPN providers that are all trustworthy, that are all secure, that you could go take a look at. ExpressVPN is another big one. But perhaps the most effective thing you could do to create additional security right now in your life is to use a VPN. So I would recommend, maybe go do some research too. If you Google top 10 VPNs, you'll definitely come up with a list of top 10s with pros and cons. For business VPNs, I would highly recommend consulting a managed service, for consulting somebody that has cybersecurity expertise in that area for your business, because setting it up for a business can be a little way different than setting it up for just an individual. Michael, if that did not answer your question, feel free to just keep popping some more in there. And then Vicky asks, how good is Bitdefender's VPN? I'll be honest, I have no idea. I didn't even know Bitdefender had a VPN, and I have not done any research. I haven't checked it out at all, so I don't know that I would be qualified to comment on that. My guess is it'll be just like all the others, does the job well. Then our last topic here. So avoiding SMS and voice phishing. So I get this all the time. I get people leaving me voicemails. I got people calling me from weird different places, asking, to sign up for something, asking for me to give them my information for certain accounts that I have with my bank or whatever. So there are four rules that you should remember when anyone calls you or texts you attempting to get something from you. First is, don't give out any of your information. And I really do mean that. If you're, I always come up with a bank because that seems to be the most worrisome. Like if your bank calls you, it's like, oh, everything, you worry about everything. So let's pretend your bank calls you. First, don't give out your information. If your bank is calling you because of a security concern on your account or an issue with payment or anything like that, they have all of the information they need, right? Your bank is calling you. They know who you are. They're calling a number they have on record for you. They don't need your password. They don't need anything from you to actually know who you are and to be able to get the information they need from you. 2, contact only through secure channels. What I mean by that is, let's say you're actually worried that there might be something wrong. The person who called you is convincing you that there's an issue with your bank. Hang up. This is what you should say. Well, all right, I'm sick of those calls too, Michael. What you should do is tell them, this individual that you're talking to, I'm going to hang up the phone and I'm going to go to my bank's website. I'm going to find the support phone number at the bank's website, and I'm going to call that number and go through the process. So any company that has proper security procedures will never tell you not to do that. It is always in their best interest and in your best interest to ensure that everybody knows that they are being contacted through secure channels, i.e. The actual email address is on the website. The actual phone number is on the website. So if you're ever worried, always go back to that, because that'll take care of things. Third is be suspicious. A lot of problems that happen with any pieces of software, any bank you use, almost always can be handled with automation, right? They don't need you to get involved. It's just handled without you needing to step in and do anything. So if anyone's calling you saying that there's an issue with your account, or this payment can't happen, or X, Y, throw in any type of excuse, always be suspicious. Always be suspicious. And the fourth is refuse the request. I will end with this, so specifically about SMS phishing. If anyone ever calls you and says, I need your account name and password to log in and verify X, Y, Z, ABC, anything, hang up the phone. That is not your bank. That is not the person. Your password is your password. So to give you guys a little bit more insight on how passwords are stored, is that when you create your account, right? I created my Zoom account. There's a username and password attached to that. Zoom that has no idea what my password is. No idea at all, right? So if they ask me for my password, they're asking for something that is not theirs, right? And they will never ask for your password to do anything. They will be able to log into your account using their own methods without your password. It's your password for a reason. It's not theirs. So if anyone ever texts you or calls you or leaves a voicemail and says, hey, I need your username, I need your password, I just want to log in and check a few things, hang up the phone, block the number, report the number, do whatever you want. Do not ever give out your password to anyone ever asking you for it, ever. And if you're really concerned that your account might be compromised, somebody says your account's compromised, so go check your password. Go back to number 2, go to the website, the official website, call back with the official phone number, and you can feel free to reset your password to something stronger. Maybe you're going to be using a password manager by now. Hey, maybe not. But always go back to the secure channel, refuse the request, reset the password on your own if you would like. So what does SMS phishing look like? Often very little to no information. There's just going to be some kind of base appeal to the human. In this case, it's urgency. Your ID requires verification. And then with voicemail phishing, they come in all shapes and sizes. Never give out your login information. Your password does not need to be reset. I already kind of addressed that very clearly. And be suspicious. Just be suspicious of people calling you, asking you for random things all the time. Yep. Okay. So that was the last slide. I'm sure it's 10:53. If there's any very small last minute questions, I could answer them right now. If not, here's how you could get in touch with me. I noticed now that you guys cannot click on my LinkedIn profile link. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Connor Swalm. You can look at our website, or that is my direct email address if you have any questions.
Just a quick one before we wrap it up. I'm sure 1 or 2 questions might come up because we're left with I think 6 minutes. I just want to draw the attention of my wonderful attendees that I did posted a 30-second survey about today's webinar. Remember, we at Temple SPDC, we always cherish your feedbacks, even as it helps us to improve on the services we provide to you guys as a low cost. So can you take 30 seconds of your time and help us to fill out the survey link, please? I think question just popped up on the chat box.
Peggy says, is there any concerns with staff using personal cell phones to check work email? At the end of the day, having employees use personal devices to do any bit of work there is risk involved with that, right? And if it's their personal device, you don't have any right as the business owner or as their boss to say what they can and cannot do with you can't put software on their personal device to monitor stuff. So what I would do is, if you want them to be able to check work email on their cell phone, you have to buy them a company device at the end of the day. It's not an enormous security risk necessarily, depending upon the type of business that you do. However, it is still an inherent risk. Thank you, Mike. Awesome. Yeah, please fill out the form. Let me know how I did. If you like the presentation, I'd love to speak more on it. I'm a bit of a cybersecurity nut. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but guess it's what I enjoy. So I had a great time here chatting with all of you.
I know. I think it's everybody's concern because like this is a digital world and virtually everybody has like an email address and the rest. And you keep receiving like a lot of messages, on a daily basis and people trying to hack your account on one or two
Yeah,
different occasions. So I think it concerns every one of us here.
it does. It's one of the fastest growing industries. I think even above healthcare now. And I view it as, as devices, as your fridge becomes smart, as your microwave gets connected to just the scope of just technology these days is just increasing at such a pace. I view it as a huge concern that I'm really interested in helping solve. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's paramount, for people to be educated in this aspect because you keep receiving series of calls and series of messages. Personally, I've actually received a lot of messages.
Mhm.
Sometimes calls will come in, and you can imagine someone demanding for your social security
Yeah,
number, and I was like, who does that? Someone calling you, asking you of your
right.
credit card number, and the rest is social security, and you want to know your password. I was like, no, 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 these are hackers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the IRS will never call you ever.
Yeah, they,
Quote me
they
on that.
wouldn't. They wouldn't. Someone asked if the copy of the PowerPoint and the recording would be shared. Of course, I will try as much as possible to make sure you guys have it either today or first thing tomorrow in the morning.
Awesome.
Uh, okay. Before we wrap it up, I just want to use this opportunity to thank each and every one of you guys for keeping it a day with us. Kono, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Like I said a few seconds ago, it's something that concerns everybody because there are a
Yeah.
lot of people out there that are ignorant about this wonderful information because a lot of people have been victims of hackers, trying to get into their secret closet, and a lot of people have lost a lot of things. Thank
Yeah.
you for taking your time and thank you for educating us in this aspect. Before I also wrap it up, I also want to use this opportunity to thank my wonderful SPDC colleagues for their usual cooperation and support. Without them, we wouldn't have been here and this webinar wouldn't have come into existence. Thank you, everyone, and do enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.